All right, good afternoon. My name is Jonelle Williams-Pagan, Program Manager for No Kid Hungry. Thank you for joining us for our third session, Tips on Direct Certification and Data Management. So today's agenda, just a couple of housekeeping items, some updates, and then we'll allow our guest speakers, Jen McNeil from LunchAssist, and our own Adam Wozniak, Senior Manager for Measurement Planning and Analysis, joining us on a wonderful demo and data management tips section, and then Q&A and a couple of items in our closing. We will only be recording the presentation section. We are not recording the Q&A, so you can ask any type of questions that you want. If you want to turn your camera on and engage with us, also if you want to update your name on the Zoom, please highlight over your profile pic. You'll see the 3 buttons icon. Just click on that and you'll see the option to rename yourself. Next slide, please. Just highlighting all of the my colleagues that work with us on the CEP work group, Daisy Munguia-Pignon, Robin Hernandez, Tommy Lee, who is behind all the technical parts, and Paige Pordacki, who will now be providing you with a little federal update.
Hi, everyone. So I hope this isn't the first time you've heard it, but maybe I might be able to answer some questions, and of course, probably instill many more questions than the answers I can provide. But if you haven't heard, Congress did not extend USDA's nationwide waiver authority. And what this means is that waivers are set to expire at the end of June related to the school meals programs and the summer meals programs. So we are waiting on USDA guidance on exactly what that means for June operations. But we suggest that you plan for a summer 2022 as if waivers will not be available. Potentially there might be some small flexibilities, but any type of because of the USDA's waiver authority not being extended, waivers can only be set on a state-by-state basis, and they have to be cost neutral, which limits a lot of what USDA can do. That being said, related to this topic of CEP, states can submit waiver requests, including those that extend CEP deadlines. And I believe that that is something that California is pursuing. So that's a little bit of the state context as it relates to CEP there. But in terms of summer, again, planning as if the waivers will not be available. And as soon as we have updated guidance from USDA, we'll be sure to share it out.
Thank you, Paige. So now going on to our guest speakers. Introducing Jen McNeil, the co-founder for LunchAssist, and Adam Wozniak, Senior Manager, Measurement Planning and Analysis. Take it away, Jen.
All right, thanks Jonelle and everyone at the No Kid Hungry team for organizing this webinar, and thank you to all of you for being here today. It's really nice to chat with you, and I'm excited to share some information about data management for CEP. And yeah, this is something that that we're really excited to share with you. So before I jump into it, I just want to share a tiny bit about LunchAssist, who we are, and kind of to give you a little bit of background of like why I'm interested in this topic, because data management is really not our major focus, right? But we do have quite a bit of experience with it. So LunchAssist was founded in 2016 when I left my position as a director at Encinitas School District. Prior to that time, I was the director at Hemet Unified. So I've done quite a bit of work in Southern California. And over the years, our team has actually grown to have 10 team members spread across 4 continents, if you can believe that. And you're probably hopefully familiar with some of our offerings, including our free resources that we make available, like monthly community calls and weekly email updates. And if you're not getting invites to those or access to some of those free resources, please be sure to reach out. You can sign up for our free community membership at lunchassist.org/join. And then we also do have a unique sort of membership called LunchAssist Pro, where we offer lots of training. We have boot camps, courses, one-on-one coaching and consulting available. And these are two of our LunchAssist Pro resources that I'll be sharing with everyone here on the call today. So we have a brand new data checklist for the community eligibility provision that kind of couples well with today's talk. And then we have a universal meals comparison chart that we created just specifically for all the unique kind of brainstorming that we're all doing for next year. At the moment, we work with about 45 clients at school districts and charter schools in California. And then we also work with nonprofit partners like our pals at the Center for Eco-Literacy. And we have about 900 members, 3,000 subscribers, and we're definitely trying to make sure that everything we do is super, super helpful to the schools, and that it resonates with you all, and especially focusing on schools in California, but we really do take a nationwide approach. And I just want to say hello to everyone from California, and also those of you who might be joining us from another state. So the talk that we'll do today is a little bit more focused on California, but there should be still lots of nuggets of information because CEP is a national program, right? But there may be some California jargon. And then, yeah, so basically what does all this about us have to do with CEP? Well, part of the journey that we've taken as an organization, and even just for me, how I've learned over the years is helping our clients with their CEP applications, right? So over the years, we've helped maybe 12 or 13 different school districts in California, with actually California and Washington, apply for CEP and help them manage all of their data. And we've also supported over 100 school districts on their administrative reviews. And this is where we've learned actually about a lot of the mistakes that can happen, and where we've really looked at a CEP data that's been mismanaged. We've actually worked with schools who've gotten kicked off the program because their data was so bad, and we came in to kind of try to fix it and we couldn't. And so, we've seen all of these things that can go wrong, and then we've refined our process to sort of learn and develop something that will help make sure that doesn't happen to any of our clients. And now I am really excited to be able to share this with all of you. So we've never gotten to share this information outside of our core group of clients. So thank you to No Kid Hungry for making this space available for all of us to brainstorm on CEP. All right, so a wise woman once told me that the reason she was so wise is because she made every mistake imaginable and learned from each one. And that wise woman is actually on the call today. That was Sally Sparrow, our senior advisor and former director. And she's right. I think one of the best ways to learn is to make mistakes, but it's also no fun. And I don't know about you, but I hate making mistakes. So how about we skip to the end and we just tell you about all the mistakes that we've seen and how you can prevent them from happening to you. Deal? Okay, let's do it. So I'm going to start by taking you through 10 common mistakes that we've seen with data that is put together for CEP. And as we discuss them, we'll also talk about what you can do, obviously, to prevent these from happening, right? And so by the end of this section, you'll actually have 10 strategies for success. All right, so common mistake numero uno is forgetting to save direct certification lists throughout the year. So we really encourage you to do your direct certification matching on a monthly basis. And most folks probably would have already done about 3 or 4 matches during the school year at minimum. The question is, did you save those files, right? So if you're not sure, you can try to start pulling those together now. I would suggest doing it as early as possible and getting organized with all of your different direct certification lists. And ideally, we like to see as a best practice to pull direct certification monthly in the lead up to applying for CEP. And this includes all of your different lists, but specifically what I'm talking about here is in California, the CalPADS lists, right? So doing that monthly will help you certify the highest number of students because, and I don't know why this happens, I've just seen it, so I know it exists, is that sometimes you'll have a student that shows up on the CalPADS list one month, but then they're not on the list the next month. So just to play it safe, we recommend downloading and saving direct certification lists throughout the year. So it's cool enough for Napoleon Dynamite, then hopefully that's a good best practice for you. And then along similar lines, another common mistake is saving the CalPADS extract, so what you pull out of that system, is not saving it in .txt, so saving it in a different format. So too often schools, they don't actually realize that you need to save the CalPADS extract in this specific format, right? So I often have clients ask if they can export a list directly from their point of sale system, or if they can provide me with this list once it's already been converted into Excel. Unfortunately, we really need we can't use the POS as our original source documentation for CEP. And in fact, we really can't use this once it's been converted into Excel. We're supposed to be working from the .txt file, and that's also what is requested when you turn your application in with CDE. So again, don't ask me why. I'm not sure why the CalPADS list is in .txt, but this is the original source data for your direct certification, and it must be saved in this format. So they're going to look like this, what you see on the screen, and then you just want to go ahead and save them. And if you're not sure, it might be a good time to like log into CalPADS and see. Sometimes I think the previous extracts are still available for you to re-download. So you can kind of look and see what you've done this year and start getting those files all organized. And then I just wanted to point out that you can see this extract here. This has all been, like, I've changed all the names and numbers, right? So this is based on what a real extract looks like, but there's no sensitive student data on here. Okay, on to mistake number 3. Well, I think Kevin Hart's expression pretty much sums up how I feel about this one. So in addition to all the CalPADS lists, you're going to get other lists, right? Like migrant, homeless, Head Start, county lists, things like that. And you'll get them potentially from different people, different contacts in your network, in your school community. And occasionally they might send you something in PDF. So trust me when I tell you, you do not want any data in PDF format, right? That's going to make it really difficult for you to analyze your data. So I just mentioned that CalPADS data needs to be in .txt, all other data, everything else in Excel. Trust me, this is going to make your process of analyzing your data so much easier. It's a workable document that you can use if it's in Excel. So that'll help you run a data comparison, and we're actually going to be showing you a tool that you can use to do that. So you'll need it in Excel for that. So, and of course, if you get data from someone and it's not in if it's in PDF or a different format, go ahead and just ask them if they can resend it. A lot of times it's just the way they're exporting it from their system. Alrighty, moving on. So I think by now you understand that saving files properly is actually really cool. So now let's move on to common mistake number 4, which is obtaining DC lists without a student ID number. So I often come across this when examining the direct certification lists that are provided by the county, or sometimes local level lists of students who might be like qualified as homeless or migrant. Sometimes those, for some reason, they don't have an ID listed, and that can be a problem when you're trying to analyze your data as well and match up, like, and remove duplicates and things like that. So as you can see here on the left side of the screen, this is a non-issue for the CalPADS list because those text files, they always have a student ID on them. And this is super helpful because, as you can see here on the right side of the screen, you're going to need the student identifier eventually for the CEP application. So the image on the right is actually the S&P 55, which is one of the CEP application forms. So having the student identifier across all of your different lists is going to make it possible for you to electronically compile your data in an accurate manner. And without that, there's really no way for you to like electronically match up students, because you really can't match them up without any, like, by last name, right? It's not going to work. So this is essential to good data management. So definitely ensure that all of your DC lists include the student ID as a best practice. All right, so speaking of that CEP application, here's a little sneak peek at what the actual application, the S&P 55 form, this is one of the application forms, looks like for those schools who are in California. And as you can see, it's an Excel format, right? So, and then you have two tabs. So you have one where you enter the list of students who are enrolled, and that's super easy because you just pull the students from your enrollment system. That's usually pretty simple from your student information system. The second list over here, this is the identified students list. And this is the list where I see the most issues. And this is because you have to compile lots of different original source data from CalPADs, from migrant coordinators, from the homeless liaison, etc., to make sure that this list of identified students is correct. So common mistake number 5 occurs when the list of identified students has students listed who are actually not enrolled. And so that I've seen quite a few times. And in the example you can see here on the screen, you can see that Mike Myers was listed on the identified students tab, but he's nowhere to be found on the enrollment. So sneaky, sneaky Mike Myers. And again, I've seen this so many times, so it's not good because eventually it'll change your percentage, right? So if you have lots of students listed as identified, but they're not enrolled on April 1st, then that's going to change your percentage. It's going to drop your percentage lower than what you initially calculated. And then potentially could kick it back. And when the state does their validation review, they're going to have more questions for you. They're going to have you change your application. So you just want to prevent that. And again, this is something that we're going to show you, as Jonelle alluded to. We have a tool that we're going to show you, and it's going to help you prevent having any of these issues. Alrighty, so common mistake number 6 is similar but different. So this common mistake occurs when the student is present on the identified students list, but they are not on any of the original direct certification lists. So in this example, we've got Amy Bryant here, and Amy is listed as being certified as Medi-Cal free, but then when we go to the direct certification list, she's nowhere to be found. So this is also not good because we have to have the original source documentation to show how each student was identified. And if we don't have that, we really can't count this student. So again, I've seen this quite a few times. It's very, very common. And it usually happens because the school might have just not saved the original list that Amy was on. And, you know, for some reason, Amy might have dropped off of the CalPADS list. So it can happen, and this is why it's good to save all of those lists and to put together your identified students list from the original source documentation rather than trying to pull information out of your point of sale system, right? So that's kind of some of the ways that this can happen. So to avoid this, go ahead and make sure that each of the identified students are present on a direct certification list. And again, this is something that you can do in the tool that we'll show you in a few minutes. So building up lots of anticipation for that tool. Okay, so we're over halfway through the common mistakes. That's good. Number 7 is counting the same student multiple times. So you're probably aware that students, they can show up on more than one direct certification list with more than one eligibility, right? So for example, a student can be directly certified as homeless, and then later in the year, they can show up in CalPADS as directly certified under S for SNAP. So, and that's also, SNAP, by the way, is CalFresh on this hierarchy. That's the same thing. So this is extremely common, and you must have a process in place for removing those duplicate eligibilities from your final CEP application. Otherwise, again, your students will include, your identified students list could potentially include students who are certified multiple times, and it like duplicates, right? So you don't want to have duplicates. So when you do run into this issue, just keep in mind that there is this hierarchy for direct certification eligibility. And again, this hierarchy here on the screen specifically references California, but this is the direct certification eligibility hierarchy. And as you can see, DC SNAP through CalFresh is prioritized over all other DC types. So if you're looking at a student who's got like direct certification SNAP and homeless, you would go ahead and use the higher level of certification, which is CalFresh SNAP. And then you can learn more about this. This will be linked in the follow-up resources if you want to learn more about the hierarchy. And this is also super helpful, just like side note while it's on the screen, about which this shows like where you can extend eligibility from. And I think that that was one of the questions we had last month on the working group, and folks were asking about TANF. So CalWORKS is TANF, and you can extend eligibility from TANF. So just FYI there. So again, when you do have students who show up on multiple direct certification lists with multiple eligibilities, go ahead and count each identified student only once with the eligibility that aligns with their direct certification hierarchy. Okay, so speaking of extended eligibility, this is the process where a student who is directly certified is able to extend their eligibility to another member of the household, such as a sibling or a cousin that lives with them. So this is something that Agnes spoke about on last month's working group. So if you missed her talk, please, I really encourage you to listen to the recording. She shared lots of best practices for all of our data, but I liked really what she shared about extended eligibility as well. I thought it was super helpful. So common mistake number 8 is not doing extended eligibility or not doing a thorough enough job of it. Okay, so I think sometimes this can be something that is overlooked. And on the screen here, you can see that our little student Olive is directly certified for SNAP, for CalFresh. And it turns out that she actually has 2 siblings, Olga and Omar, and they didn't show up on our direct certification list for some reason, but that's okay because we can extend eligibility to Olga and Omar so that they're qualified and they count towards your percentages. And this is what can really help boost your percentages, right? So just keep in mind that when you do extend eligibility, it's super important to note who that original eligibility was extended from. So in this scenario, we're going to want to make a note somewhere that Olga and Omar, their eligibility was extended from Olive, so that when the state does their validation review, then they'll go back to see, okay, was Olive on a list? And this, if you can make a note of that, that will help you. And this is also something that we have included on the tool that will show you. It actually shows you that original student. Okay, almost done here. So mistake number 9 is forgetting about students or schools that are not present on the student information system, or those who might not be listed in CalPads. So this may or may not apply to you. It's not necessarily something that every school or school district encounters, but just remember that you possibly could have some students who attend your schools where you're applying for CEP, but who potentially are not in your student information system. You also might have schools that are not considered a site under your district, but they are one of your feeding sites, right? They are one of your SFA sites. They're just not part of your district per se. So this kind of scenario I've seen when folks have a preschool program, also potentially sometimes with continuation or county kind of alternative schools, or charter schools that are part of their SFA, but they're not part of like that actual district enrollment. They have their own separate enrollment system. So for example, just to kind of give you a couple of examples here, when we did direct certification and CEP applications for a district in the Central Valley, we needed to include data from the charter school that was part of their SFA, but was not part of the district. Or another school in LA where we had 120 preschool students that attended one of their schools, and those preschool students were not in the student information system, and they also were not in CalPads. And on that one, we actually were like a little bit stumped at first because we could easily work with the preschool program director to get the enrollment data, but we didn't have a lot of data on how they were certified, at least not directly certified, right? Since they weren't in CalPads and they weren't Head Start, we were sort of stuck on how to certify them. And we didn't want to mark them as paid because it was going to completely throw off their CEP application. It was so many students. But because we knew that they were mostly coming from families that were directly certified, we were able to end up doing extended eligibility for most of them. So that was super helpful. Most of them did have older siblings that were on the direct certification list. So we just went through that process of extending their eligibility. So keep in mind that you only need to include data for schools where meals are served and where you're applying for CEP, right? So if there's a continuation school in your district where there's no meals served and you're not going to be including them in your CEP application, then you don't need to prepare data for them in your CEP. You don't need to pull that enrollment and direct certification data. So my strategy for you here is that just keep in mind when you're preparing CEP data, be sure to include all the students who are enrolled at all of the school sites where you're applying for CEP. All right, finally, common mistake number 10 is trying to manage all of this manually. Don't do it. Even if you have a really small district or you're just applying for one school, it's best to try to do this all electronically. And we're going to show you how to do that in just a moment using a tool that we created. But seriously, I can't emphasize this enough. Robin, who works at No Kid Hungry, we were talking about this the other day, and we've seen this, like we've seen schools that have 10,000 students with highlighters and printed papers and trying to like line everything up, and it's just not, don't do that. It's gonna, don't do the whole like Control F and try to match everyone up on your application. It's just gonna result in errors. It's gonna be a big headache, very inefficient. So there is a better way. I've been managing this for years for people through my own Excel spreadsheets, and I'm really excited to pass it over in a moment to Adam, who's created a really cool electronic tool for us. So stick with us and we'll show you that in just a moment. So I hope I have your attention and you now have, top of mind some of the common mistakes that can happen. And here's a little summary of what we've just discussed with those mistakes sort of turned upside down and now into strategies for success. Okay, so now we're going to pass it over to Adam, and he's going to show us a sneak peek at the tool. All right.
Hey everybody, thanks Jen, and good afternoon everybody joining. Thanks for being with us today. First of all, I just really want to give a big shout out to Jen and the LunchAssist team. What I'm showing here is really their brainchild, and the process was developed there. Really what we did at No Kid Hungry is add in a few Excel formulas to make it hopefully a little bit more automated and easy to use. So really what the tool is trying to do is really address a lot of things that Jen just talked about in terms of some of the common issues that folks run into. So we're looking at it as a single place to have all of your enrollment and direct certification data, and to easily manage duplicates and make sure we're getting accurate counts of enrollment and identified students. Today, we don't have the time to really do an in-depth tutorial of everything in the tool, but we do have written instructions that'll be circulated after the call that go into a lot more depth and go step by step, really at a granular level to make it as user-friendly as possible. A few notes before we dive into it. Make sure you're using this tool. This is the major tool we're going to be looking at in Microsoft Excel. So download it, open in Excel. Don't try to use Google Sheets. It won't be compatible. And this workbook, it's a tool. Hopefully we'll make this direct certification process a little bit faster and easier, but it's certainly not foolproof. It's not the easy button. So follow the steps carefully and critically review the results at the end. Make sure it lines up with what you'd expect to see in your district. This is hot off the presses. We've tried to validate it as best as possible, but formula errors are possible, as are data entry errors. So be careful, use it as a tool, but make sure you're reviewing what's coming out the other end of it. And there's a lot happening on the back end, a lot of comparing lists and lookups. So at times it does run a little bit slowly. Give it some time, be patient. One thing we highly recommend, and is in the Word document, is to go to the formulas ribbon and change the calculation options to manual. It's usually starts on automatic. Manual just lets you tell Excel when you want to calculate the spreadsheet. So normally it kind of does on a rolling basis, and that's where you get the wheel going and it'll start to freeze. So if you have it on manual, you'll see in the instruction, there's times where it says go back and hit calculate now, and that'll speed up the process a little bit for you. And of course, Jen, feel free to jump in at any moment as we're going through this. So backing out a little bit, really what this list is trying to get us to is what Jen was showing earlier in the webinar, is this SMP 55 report, which is one of the application documents that has to go to CDE for with your CEP application. So it has a instructions tab with some information to fill out, and then as Jen was showing, this enrollment tab and identified students tab. So this sheet will help that process of getting to this SMP 55. So opening up the tool now, you'll see a bunch of tabs along the bottom, and this is where we'll be consolidating all of our data. So the first and most important tab is this enrollment data. So this is the data that you'll download from the student information system and paste into the spreadsheet in columns A through K. So the most important ones are B through E. Those are the ones that show up on the enrollment report in the SMP 55. And then G through K are ones, if you're doing extended eligibility, that'll be the address or the household identifier that you'll want to use to match households to each other. But we're not going to go in depth in extended eligibility on this call due to time. And then, so that's your student enrollment. And then each of these tabs down here are those different lists that you can use for direct certification. So the ones that Jen mentioned before. The major one being the CalPADS information, which you can see here. So this, you can download all the CalPADS data as one list, even though there's different categories here, even if there's categories like Medi-Cal reduced that don't directly certify students, you can paste it all in here and the spreadsheet will just be looking for those programs that directly certify students, even if there's duplicate entries here. The important thing is making sure you've got the site ID in C and the category in J. If you paste it in and it looks funky with everything in column A and these little caret things in between where the columns are supposed to be, that looks like the text file that Jen showed, there's an appendix to the instructions that gives you step-by-step instructions of getting it into this nice format, so it'll work with the tool. And then all the other direct certification lists look exactly the same. And really all you have to do here is put in the column A that student ID that uniquely identifies a student in student A, in column A. In the other columns, you can put whatever data is helpful for you or nothing at all. It's only really looking towards column A, but if you want to have student names or any notes, you can include them there and it won't mess anything up. So you can see this for all the different programs. And if there's some data for the county list, again, for these non-CalPADS ones, here you need to put in all the students who can be directly certified by these programs. If you put in IDs of students who can't be certified by these programs, who aren't in these programs, it'll count them. So just be careful there. So going back to our enrollments tab, so we talked through these blue columns, A through K. Going over a little bit to the right, so L through O, these are all formulas and calculations, but they're user-facing. So you'll need to look at these at certain points, but you don't need to edit these at all. The first one is column L, which flags that there's duplicates. So kind of as Jen was talking about, the idea here is we get a non-duplicated list of enrollment and everything else ties to it. So as long as our enrollment tab doesn't have any duplicates, we're not going to have duplicates on that identified student list that we're sending to CDE. So if you look here in C1, there's a little duplicates check. So right now it says good news, this table has no duplicate student IDs. We're good to go. If there are duplicates, it'll flag how many there are. And then in column L, you can go and filter for the ones that are duplicated, delete the data so we keep just one record for each student. The eligibility type is what program these students are identified through. If they're on multiple lists, it'll roughly follow that hierarchy that Jen shared earlier. And then here, N and O, these are for extended eligibility, which we're not going to get into in detail, but the sibling ID, that's the, I think it was Olga and Omar example that Jen shared earlier. This shows if we're being certified through extended eligibility, what's the ID of that sibling that they're extended through? And then this is just a combination of all of these columns to show what's the identifier they're using for the household. So you'll see at the end of this, if you're using those manual calculations, which we recommend, you want to go up here to formulas, calculate the sheet. And if you head all the way over to the end, there's this district ISP summary, which will summarize all this data. So you'll see your total enrollment here, and then how many students are identified through the different programs. That's a total of 9 identified students for an ISP of 69%. And if you want to see that at the school level, you're going to have to refresh the pivot tables. That's in the Word document as well. And then it'll show by each site enrollment, identified students, and ISP if you're, looking for grouping or applying for only a subset of the schools in your district. So the last piece is now, okay, we've got this list. How do we get it back over into that S&P 55 that we were looking at earlier? So I'm just going to minimize this a little bit. So the first one is the enrollment tab. CDE pre-populates this with a few examples. So I'm just going to go ahead and delete those examples. And then this is set up in the exact same order and format. So all you have to do is select those 4 columns, site name through first name, copy, paste in here. That one's done. And then for the identified students, it's very similar, but we're adding in this eligibility type column, and then the columns are in different order, so it's a little bit more manual. So here, we're going to want to filter just to show the students who are identified. So we want to remove the blanks. So here I will unclick the blanks, hit OK. And so as it's filtering, it's doing math on many more rows, knowing that a lot of your districts have more than 13 students. So this is one where it'll take some time. When we paste in this eligibility type, this is in the instructions as well, we want to use a special type of paste called paste values. This will actually paste the letters that are showing up here. So it'll paste SNAP instead of all of this gobbledygook formula that will break when you save it and send it off to CDE. So of course, when I'm sharing my screen is when it's going to really take a long time.
Adam, I just wanted to jump in here and say, like, this is probably one of my favorite parts of the tool is that, like, even though I know it's taking a moment to calculate, it's really nice that it shows that we're going to be able to just copy over that eligibility type, because that's often like a really hard one to organize when we manage the data and try to put it onto that S&P 55. So it seems really simple. You just have the student name ID and eligibility type. But when you've got all kinds of different data sets going on, that piece of information, having it in just one column and being able to copy and paste it over is really valuable.
Perfect. Thanks, Jen. And voila, it finally filtered. So here we can copy our eligibility type. So here is the, first we'll delete the sample data from CDE. So this special paste, we'll right click as always. I lost the copy, let me copy it again. Right click, and then here there's this clipboard with 1, 2, 3, and if you hover over it, it says values. That's the paste that we want to use. So paste it there. So now you'll see the values just snap. It's not that formula anymore. And then with the rest of these, we can just copy and paste in as we did before. So we can take the site name, copy, paste, student first name, copy, paste, last name, copy, paste, and the student identifier. And then that completes this form. That's one of the pieces that would need to get submitted to CDE. So the other thing I wanted to mention at the beginning, as you saw that wheel turning, make sure you're saving your work often. If Excel does happen to crash, it's good to be able to go back to a recent version if it doesn't auto recover for you. But yeah, with that, that's the overview. Again, I highly encourage you, if you're going to use this tool, to walk through these instructions, have them up side by side to guide you through this. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam and Jen, for all of these incredible tips and obviously the tool. We have quite a few questions. Daisy, are you ready to take it away?